ThreatReel.
And welcome everybody to the all-new ThreatReel podcast. My name is Matt Scheer, and I will let my host introduce himself.
Hello, and my name is Micah K. Brown.
And together we would like to bring you the ThreatReel podcast. We're a new information security podcast, and we're here to talk about information security news and events, things related to threats, whether it's in the enterprise environment or on folks' home networks. And tonight is more about giving you a background in who we are and what we do and why this matters, the things we want to cover in this podcast, and hopefully give folks a background and answer the questions that people might have before they need to ask them. So I will talk just briefly about myself. My name is Matt Scheer, and my employer doesn't want me talking about where I work, but I do have a full-time job as a security engineer for a large organization, and I perform digital forensics and incident response work on the computer security incident response team. And I have been around IT and information security for more than 20 years. I also happen to run a local meetup group here in Cincinnati around security called the SIMPA Security SIG, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that later in our show. And I'll let you introduce yourself, Micah, and tell folks who you are and what you do, anything else you would like to share.
Excellent. So much like you, Matt, I've been in information security, IT security for quite a while now. I graduated out of the University of Cincinnati and fell in love with the city and have been here ever since. With that being said, I also work for a very large financial/insurance organization, of which my participation in this podcast is my personal views as an independent IT security practitioner. Within Cincinnati, I've been volunteering for over 10 years with the Greater Cincinnati ISSA, as well as I'm also going through and volunteering with Queen CityCon.
Excellent. And something I want to talk about as well is maybe a little bit of our journey. So for myself, I'm from city called Mansfield, Ohio. When I'm speaking here locally with folks, I tell them I'm from just south of Cleveland originally, but I escaped. Truthfully, it's about 70 miles between Cleveland, Ohio, and Columbus, Ohio. It's sort of a Rust Belt town, if you will, and it's where I was born and raised and spent a lot of my life there, and not a lot of technology per se. It's a destination people go to for some things such as Mid-Ohio, and I know you're a big race fan, so maybe you've been there. You can tell us if you have or not when I turn it over to you. And a ski lodge called Snow Trails up on Mount Mansfield, which has some of the state's best skiing, so that's sort of what folks know it for. If you're from there originally, you might know a few hidden gems like Kingwood Center, the Mount G's Scenic Overlook, and Neiman Spring, and just some of those other things you tend to do when you're from somewhere and you explore. And I moved to this greater Cincinnati area in very early 1999. Interestingly, I took a job doing physical security kind of work, but it got me relocated, and from there I was actually able to get back into a technology-related job, something I had a hard time finding back in my hometown, and I paid a lot of dues along the way to get there. How about you, Micah?
So I grew up in Northwest Ohio in a small town called Van Wert, very similar to your small town. In fact, I have been to both your hometown as well as Mid-Ohio. Always a fun day when you're at the track. But I decided to join the University of Cincinnati. After graduating from the University of Cincinnati, I took a junior role with a very small boutique IT security organization here within the Cincinnati area, and that allowed me to really get my hands on supporting technology such as firewalls such as IDSs, IPSs going through. I was responsible for making sure that the servers were patched. If there was anything going on in the audit logs, I was able to go through, troubleshoot, research, and fix that. After about a year and a half, I was given a fantastic opportunity to jump over to a local MSSP in the area, which I spent several years there. And initially, I started out as a network security engineer for them, so doing full stacks, routers, switches, firewalls, telephony. And by the time I had been there for several years, I was given a great opportunity to join my current employer, where I'm on the architecture and engineering. So I'm kind of on the team that I often refer to as our own internal professional services. So I will get either brought into an existing project or tasked with leading a project for implementing some sort of security control or bringing a new control into our environment.
Excellent. And I know for myself, the journey to information security was really the point where I knew I wanted to do it, because I get asked about this on a somewhat frequent basis. Is how I got interested in it in the first place. And the truth is that, and I've told this story before, but in I want to say around 1995, my father used to bring home, he worked for a telephone company, and he was actually an accountant, but he was one of the few at the time that sort of understood computers and technology, at least well enough. He had a passing interest in it, and to keep himself updated on industry trends, he would read a magazine called Information Week, and he would frequently bring those home and share them with me. And it was one of those few things where we had a common interest and we could kind of bond over it a little bit. So I would read through that magazine, and I want to say it was in a 1995 edition, where Dan Farmer had made the news. He had released a open source vulnerability scanner, and it was sort of the first open source one that encompassed multiple vulnerability checks in it. Prior to that, there had been a lot of individual tools and so forth, and there were commercial solutions, but nobody had really open sourced a big vulnerability scanner that would check for a lot of different vulnerabilities. And it was called Satan, which stood for the Security Analysis Tool for Analyzing Networks. And while everybody was sort of blown away by the tool and the fact that he was just giving it away and what it would mean for the future of network security, which was really an afterthought in those days, the thing that really struck me was he was working for Sun Microsystems at the time, and his sole career focus was doing computer security work. And I had never heard of anybody who could just focus on information security for a living. That sort of intrigued me, and as a I'll just call myself a kid at the time, it was really enthused me that I thought that would just be the coolest job ever. And it took me honestly over 20 years from that point on before I finally got my first opportunity in information security. But that was one of the big things that piqued my interest. Of course, prior to that, I'd always been interested in stories of hacking related topics that would occasionally make the news because somebody would do something that people hadn't originally anticipated somebody being able to do. So those kind of stories stuck with me, as well as the movie War Games was sort of the first thing that sort of really showed a little bit of something representational of true hacking. How about you, Micah? What were your interests? What sort of what was your path like?
So, growing up, while I had part of my time was very much focused on going outdoors, camping, a lot of my other time, I just really had always been drawn to technology. For some reason, technology spoke more to me than people. I got technology a little bit better. And just from back in the day, I can remember things like going through, and there used to be, I forget the name of this, but the first I guess I'd have to say vulnerability or tool that I had used to go through and to launch a certain or attack would have been something, I forget what it was called, but it was if you remember old ICQ, there was this program that you could download and you could boot somebody off, remote block their account. And I remember being absolutely blown away to that. And, you know, when I started, I was more, at least professionally, I started out more on being the help desk slash local data center guy for a very, very small niche company that gave me incredible opportunities going through and working for an MSSP on the front lines. I mean, that was like drinking from a fire hose, but I really understood on a guttural level, how networking components came together, and that was always really cool. I utilized a lot of Cisco education and Cisco training platforms. At one point, in just a year and a half, I had earned 4 out of the 5 Cisco networking professional certification. So I had the NP, the voice professional, the security professional, and then the internet networking professional. And the more that I read, the more I was intrigued by all of the hacker culture, all of the new tools, learning about Metasploit, turning up something as simple as Kali Linux, and doing those types of attack the box that you legally own and legally are allowed to go through an attack.
Excellent. Yeah, it's definitely good stuff. And yeah, I remember back in the day, yeah, those early chat programs and websites and AOL itself. There were all sorts of applications that people used to use to try to boot and punt people and all sorts of other stuff. And it can even go back to the old Trojans of like NetBus and people compromising people's early Windows systems and spitting out their CD tray and ejecting stuff and just doing screen grabs and whatever else, just random silly stuff that people could use. And back orifice was another one of those, and back orifice 2K, and a lot of those Trojan things that would a lot of people did sort of start just because they had that juvenile sense of humor about them, right? And then they sort of evolved into actually taking the stuff seriously. So fun times.
I remember when I was at UC, uh, I was living in the engineering floors of the dorm, and if you were to plug in anywhere on campus your computer, you actually got a public IP address, and I was blown away. I stood up my own FTP server so I could go through and access my computer from anywhere on campus. We also went through and had some of the most reliable and fastest Quake and Unreal Tournament servers anywhere in the world.
Nice. Yeah, we all had different various methods of having fun in our own ways back in those early days. I'm not sure how much of it I would want to admit to, in part because who knows what statute of limitations are, but definitely stuff I can look back on fondly and remember back in those early days. But yeah, I definitely remember those Unreal Tournament and Quake servers and all the fun involved in those sort of things. I was never particularly great at the first-person shooter, tournament style things. I dabbled in them a little bit. Everybody used to yell at me for being a camper because that was, I figure it was easier to try to hide and play dirty than it was to, be outclassed in a, fair, fair fight back in those days. Yeah, and then people hated me on a LAN party, right? Because everybody else was playing the game. I was busy playing the game outside the game and having maybe a little too much fun with other people in the network. That was to me was more interesting than the first-person shooters themselves, and in most cases, and people didn't really understand it, and it was just fun times, and really it was like I said, sort of playing the game outside the game, just for the fun of it and the fact I was better at it. So, I want to talk a little bit about us kind of coming to work together, and I want to say my recollection of us first meeting were at maybe some of the older Cincinnati SMBA, the Security Masters of Beer Appreciation meetup groups. It was run by Jody at the time, and now is run by our good friend Barry Kimball. And of course, with the pandemic, has gone online only, but used to be on premises. And we kind of chatted a little bit there, but it wasn't a whole lot. And then I remember we ended up at a couple events together. Trying to think. I think you mentioned Cisco earlier. I want to say that we spent some time at a sort of a product review introduction, where they kind of went through the updated stuff in their product catalog it was like a lunch and learn event. But I want to say where we really started talking though was at DerbyCon 7, and it was one of those things where I just got to the hotel, walking in the lobby. It was just getting ready to open up. I needed to get to the registration desk, and I did, and then I came back down. I had picked up my speaker badge there. So at DerbyCon 7, I spoke there, giving a talk on regex. And I walked into that conference thinking I would be the only person with a mom-centered slide deck, maybe in the history of DerbyCon. And it was no time later when John Strand is giving the opening keynote and giving a real tear-jerking, one of the best keynotes I ever heard, but boy, it was heart-wrenching because, of course, his mom went through a tough time, and unfortunately, he eventually lost her. But that was just, it was one of those things like, man, no, so much for me having the only mom slide deck here. And John just, one up me for sure, maybe 10 up me for that matter. We got a chance to chat in the lobby, and it was kind of fun. And I think I was trying to crack a joke about you were talking about some of your growing pains with DLP or something. What do you remember about that day and time?
So I think you have a lot of things correct. We definitely knew of each other because we swam in some similar groups, but it really was DerbyCon 7 where our friendship really formed. And I remember I was coming out of the hotel, and we found each other out in that little breezeway. And I said, "Hey, I'm going to get some food. Do you want to come?" You're like, "Yeah, let's go to Smash Burger." So we walked over to Smash Burger, and we were 10 minutes early before they actually opened. So we decided, instead of waiting for the epic Smash Burger event that happened that year, Trevor, and instead we went and got a Chipotle.
Yeah, I remember that, and we were kind of perplexed. Like, why is Smashburger closed all of a sudden? And I think while we were in Chipotle, maybe my memory isn't so good on this because that was a few years ago, but my recollection is that you showed me the famous tweet. You want to talk about that right after our break? Thank you for listening to the all-new ThreatReel podcast. Join security engineer practitioners and show hosts Matt Scheer and Micah Brown for new episodes on the second and fourth Friday each month. Available on all major podcast hosting platforms. With a technical focus, the ThreatReel podcast interviews industry peers, discusses information security news, covers industry events, and reviews trends in cybersecurity. Visit us online at ThreatReel.com. ThreatReel.
Would you like to hear your organization's ad playing during the next episode of the ThreatReel podcast, or perhaps sponsor a monthly banner ad on ThreatReel.com? We are now accepting sponsorships. To get in on our affordable ground floor flat rate pricing for 2021, please contact us by emailing sponsor@ThreatReel.com for additional details. That's sponsor@ThreatReel.com.
As frequent speakers at information security conferences across the country, ThreatReel podcast hosts Matt Scheer and Micah Brown understand the importance of protecting valuable data. Compromised and rogue wireless access points make it possible for cybercriminals to hijack your data in transit, then steal login credentials, digital photos, financial data, personally identifiable information, private messages, and more. The best way to protect that information, other than powering down all your electronics, is by tunneling wireless connections through a securely encrypted VPN tunnel. Matt and Micah recommend using a VPN service offering extensive cross-platform support. ThreatReel podcast listeners are eligible for up to a 68% discount off NordVPN services. Please visit threatreel.com/NordVPN for details. Again, that's threatreel.com/NordVPN. And we're back. So, Micah, go ahead and tell us about Trevor.
The Twitter app was constantly blowing up around Trevor and Trevor Forget. DerbyCon really used Twitter as its unofficial dialogue at that time. And so I go through, and there was a picture of a little speck on a wrapper from Smashburger, and one of the guys that volunteers with them pretty heavily, Grifter, went through and posted a message to the effect of, "Hey, DerbyCom family, just so you know, when I was at Smashburger getting a milkshake, I made a new friend. I named him Trevor, and Trevor was a dead cockroach." And Matt, how about you tell us a little bit about the cult following of Trevor?
Yeah. So that was one of those interesting things because nobody expects to take a slurp from their milkshake and something weird comes through the straw, and it's not a chunk of strawberry. It's a dead bug, and in particular a cockroach. And it spread like wildfire pretty quickly around the conference, and then everybody knew what was going on. And I remember we were kind of talking like, wow, we just narrowly missed, like that could have been either one of us had we been there getting a milkshake just a little bit before that. So it was definitely a narrow miss to it happening to one of us. But of course it took on a life of its own, and Grifter has since given a talk about it not long afterwards at St. Con, but a lot of fun stuff came out of it. A lot of great stuff came out of it. Not so much for Smashburger, but in terms of charities and just charitable contributions and so forth. That was right when hurricanes, I believe, if I'm remembering right, they'd hit Puerto Rico, and they were able to get ham radio equipment there. They were able to raise funds for relief efforts, and bottles of water and just all sorts of stuff. And it was just this amazing outpouring from the community. But of course people played it up. I remember people had built a shrine in front of the Smashburger, in particular underneath the A rating from the Louisville Health Department, under that sign that there were like those little battery powered teacup candles and some other cards and flowers and you name it, all manner of stuff. And when somebody would go over to some unsuspecting visitor to Louisville would start walking to see what the fuss was about, people would start shouting Trevor, and of course people were playing it up for all it was worth. I saw some funny pictures of people pretending to mourn and grieve and so forth. So it really became a big deal, and then people had started up this hashtag of #TrevorForget. So it really became a popular thing. And then after that, we kept kind of bumping into each other at other conferences and so forth. And the one thing I really appreciated is you saying, just kind of talking about the stuff I had done, and just sort of remarking and saying, you really give a lot back to the community, because I give a lot of presentations to a lot of conferences and so forth, and I really appreciated that because you spend a lot of time in the community and trying to do good things and help educate people and mentor people and help people get job interviews, help them prepare for jobs, those sort of things. And when you're out there sharing knowledge and so forth, it really feels good to just sort of have somebody recognize that and bring it up. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. And it's one of those things where, I was doing my own thing with the ISSA. You were doing things with your SIMPA security SIG. Barry was taking over ownership of the SMBA. Let's see, Gary also, he was going through and he was also working with our local ISE squared chapter. And so what kind of happened was that every time we go to a different security play or security event, I'd have three great friends that I can just go through, have lunch with, that we can just say, oh, what have you seen here that's cool? This is what I've seen here that's cool. This is what vendor has the best swag.
Yeah, it definitely was a good time that we were able to interact with one another. And Cincinnati really has an unknown amount of good people here that do amazing work and amazing things. Nationally, I read about things going on in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, Austin, Boston, New York, Research Park, and Seattle. The Philadelphia paper was talking up one of their meetup groups. I read something maybe about a year and a half ago talking about, hey, if you want to be a hacker, you should be here in Dallas, Texas, because we got these groups and blah blah blah. We don't really see that going on in Cincinnati, and maybe it's our humble Midwestern upbringing where we just don't feel like we want to go out there and brag and toot our own horns and really talk stuff up as much. Or just maybe the Cincinnati Enquirer just doesn't realize that we're out there doing the kinds of things that we are doing in some of the other media outlets. We do have a couple folks that I do want to give props and credit to, though. One of them is Dave Hatter, who is frequently on local radio. And what I like about Dave Hatter is that he will talk about stuff going on that would impact consumers at a level which non-technical people can understand what's going on. He has an amazing ability to communicate that sort of material. Another individual is our good friend Dave Howard, known on the air locally as Dave the IT Guy. Currently runs the Bring Your Own Security radio show, and he has had us on that show several times. What I like about Dave is he will just tackle any topic, and he tries to vary it up and cover things. We're going to have a little bit of that ourselves. I want to focus maybe a little more on threats, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But as for myself, I know I've been on Bring Your Own Security Radio multiple times, and have learned a lot from those experiences. And of course, he's a fantastic interviewer when it comes to having guests on his program. And I've also been on Ken Underhill's Cyber Life, which is sort of focused on breaking into the computer security industry and sort of helping folks along their journey and so forth, and understand what it means to have a career, and sort of tips and tricks for doing that. So it's really a mentorship outreach sort of a podcast. And then I've also been interviewed on a podcast based out of Pittsburgh called Moscow Mules and Knopsleds, and that podcast is sort of focused on the personalities and the things that we do in information security, and then just some of our own personal interests and the things that we're involved in. I don't know anybody that just does computer security that doesn't also do other things, and for me that I do a lot of custom InfoSec related digital artwork, mostly for my own material, the group I run, the Simpa Security SIG, but also any slide decks I build out. I try to do as much custom graphic work as possible. And I've also got other things outside of work, busy family life and so forth, and of course a very demanding full-time job. But that's just some of my podcast experience, and those have been great experiences, and I know you've got some of those as well. What would you like to share?
So yeah, I've been on Mr. Howard's podcast, but most of my talking has really been at the small to medium IT security conferences. DerbyCon played such a fundamental role in maturing me as an IT security practitioner, especially DerbyCon 7. And in working with you, I came to you and I said, look, I know that you have spoken at DerbyCon. I had a great time there. Can you help put me on a path where I could go through and I could start submitting to speak at various conferences. And I've had some pretty big successes, including the final DerbyCon 9. I gave probably my favorite talk of all time that I've ever given, how to cook a five-star meal from the convenience of your hotel room, in which I cooked 4 pork butts, 2 steak dinners, 1 chicken dinner in my hotel room and gave it all away.
Yeah, I remember that talk. It was awesome and well received, and I wanted to come up on stage and give you a big hug right afterwards. I think somebody got between us, and I couldn't quite manage to get my way up there. So, here in these pandemic times, virtual hug from me to you, Micah, and
Well,
that was a fun talk. And I want to thank you again for just even mentioning me in that. Something you certainly didn't have to do, and I know I appreciated it at the time and still do. So, thank you very much for that.
Well, it was your inspiration and support that got me to the confidence level where I submitted both DerbyCon 8 and DerbyCon 9, as well as some of the other big wins that I've had in my career. One thing that I do want to highlight, at least since part of our goal is to elevate things, especially in the local Cincinnati area, is I know that we have both had some great relationships and great times at NKU's Cybersecurity Symposium, and that is always one of my favorite conferences within the Cincinnati area. So I've been honored to give them a couple ideas for what they can do this upcoming year, and I think it's going to be really cool.
Excellent. Yeah, we've definitely hit the road together, and by the way, for our listeners, that's a coordinated effort because it's just sort of fun when you have somebody to go in with and do these things and hang out with. So I know we've coordinated, and I've reached out to you. You've reached out to me, like, hey, so and so is looking for speakers, and they've opened up the CFP or they've extended the deadline, and so we've spoken in a number of places together, like Secure World Cincinnati, the Ohio Information Security Conference in Dayton, Ohio. Uh, we
Central Ohio Information Summit out of Columbus.
Yes, yeah, very good conference, as well as the Ohio Information Security Forum Anniversary Conference in Dayton, Ohio. Several others, NKU Cybersecurity Symposium. I don't know if we spoke on the same years on that one, but kind of like DerbyCon. I know I spoke at DerbyCon 5 and DerbyCon 7. In fact, DerbyCon 5 was the first conference I spoke at, and that was definitely a little nerve-wracking because you know who the audience is. You've got some of the best hackers literally in the country, consequently the world, that show up to this thing, and even a few people from international places, and they're coming to Louisville for DerbyCon, and you know you can't just sort of fudge your way through a talk there. You're going to get called out if you don't know what you're talking about or you're saying things that are incorrect. And so it's you feel a little bit of pressure from that level of scrutiny because of who the audience there is. And yeah, some of my favorite conferences to speak at were definitely the DerbyCon events, and I've also spoken at 5 B-Sides conferences in 4 different cities. So that's been good for me. I've enjoyed that. What are some highlight conferences for you that you've spoken at?
Well, don't forget about all of the fun times that we've had in Indianapolis at Circle City Con. That is always up for some cheeky fun there. So I've spoken at many of the same conferences that you also alluded to. I think one thing that I have a little bit different is that I was accepted to McAfee's Empower in 2019. So that was a pretty cool little conference. Of course, it's focused almost exclusively on the leveraging of McAfee products, but I was speaking there on DLP. DerbyCon definitely was the conference I wanted to speak at the most, but we're going to talk about it a little later. But I've got a really cool win coming up this year.
Great. Yeah, I totally forgot to bring up Circle City Con, which is shameful on my part because that's absolutely one of the hacker conferences that is within a quick driving distance. It's definitely near the top of my list. Fantastic conference every year. I haven't looked to see if they're going to be, what they're thinking, if they're going to be virtual again, or maybe postpone it till next year, or if they're going to give possibly meeting on premises a chance. It might be a little early. I want to say that usually runs in June, so you can correct me if you know better than I do. Definitely a good one, and I believe that same time you were at Empower, I was actually in Dallas, Texas at the ISSA International Summit, and that was my first time giving a talk called Lend Me Your IRs, which was about incident response, and really one of my favorite talks because I do live demo reenactments of actual investigations, and I would show the technical underpinnings of both the attacker side from the offensive security standpoint, and then also from the investigation side on the defensive front.
Excellent. One of the more fun things that we've done at a con was at Circle City one year. You helped chip in with a meetup that we held, in which we gave away an entire park, but just to promote our local IT security groups in Cincinnati, and that was just a fun little rogue experiment.
Yep, you're absolutely right. Thanks for bringing that up because that was definitely a good thing. Fun times on that. So we've talked a lot about the conferences and so forth because I think we both get a lot out of them and learn a lot by attending them, and we've been blessed to be able to share some of our knowledge on those, and it's definitely been good times for both of us along the way, and that's what's made it fun for me is just kind of going to some of these same conferences and we get to hang out and we get to speak at some of them and even if we don't speak at some of them we get a chance to sit on each other's talks and as well as a lot of other ones and learn from our industry peers, and there's always just good variety of topics at particularly some of these multi-track conferences where it honestly gets kind of tough to pick and choose what you want to sit in on and what you want to listen to. Why don't we go ahead and transition and we'll talk a little bit about some of our local community involvement because we've both been heavily involved in the local information security meetup group scene. I know I've spoken at a lot of our local technology groups, and that's been great fun, and it's always been well received, so I've enjoyed it. I run the SIMPA Security SIG, which is the Cincinnati Networking Professionals Association Security Special Interest Group. So many words, we just call it the SIMPA Security SIG, but it's SIMPA is a nonprofit, volunteer-run, completely unpaid individuals that will essentially help other local technology professionals. It's really a peer group of technology professionals helping other technology professionals. And SIMPA has several special interest groups, and I happen to run the group that is dedicated to security, the Security Special Interest Group, or Security SIG. And I've been running that officially for probably about 3.5 years now. And one thing I've always tried to do is sort of recreate that DerbyCon B-sides kind of feel and vibe to it. Obviously, we have about a 2.5 hour monthly meeting, so not near as long, and we don't have multiple tracks, and we don't have workshops and training sessions and a lot of the things you'll find at the bigger conferences. But in terms of the talks and the speakers, we actually boast a lot of former DerbyCon speakers have spoken for the SIMPA Security SIG. I'm very proud of that. I myself, as we've talked about, have spoken there, both at B-Sides events and DerbyCons and a lot of other places. And so I try to vary it up a lot. I will try to cover a lot of different ground with a lot of topics. Mostly we're a very technically focused group that focuses on developing skills for in the trenches cybersecurity practitioners. It's not to say we won't sometimes take a step off the beaten path and do some other topics, but really our bread and butter is focused on the technical aspects of working professionals. And I've booked some really well-known speakers, and it's a great core group of folks, and you've been attending those for quite a while, so thank you for that. Micah, after our break, I'd like to get your thoughts on our local information security group involvement. Thank you for listening to the all-new ThreatReel podcast. Join security engineer practitioners and show hosts Matt Scheurer and Micah Brown for new episodes on the second and fourth Friday each month. Available on all major podcast hosting platforms. With a technical focus, the ThreatReel podcast interviews industry peers, discusses information security news, covers industry events, and reviews trends in cybersecurity. Visit us online at ThreatReel.com. ThreatReel.
Would you like to hear your organization's ad playing during the next episode of the ThreatReel podcast, or perhaps sponsor a monthly banner ad on ThreatReel.com? We are now accepting sponsorships. To get in on our affordable ground floor flat rate pricing for 2021, please contact us by emailing sponsor@ThreatReel.com for additional details. That's sponsor@ThreatReel.com.
As frequent speakers at information security conferences across the country, ThreatReel podcast hosts Matt Scheurer and Micah Brown understand the importance of protecting valuable data. Compromised and rogue wireless access points make it possible for cybercriminals to hijack your data in transit, then steal login credentials, digital photos, financial data, personally identifiable information, private messages, and more. The best way to protect that information, other than powering down all your electronics, is by tunneling wireless connections through a securely encrypted VPN tunnel. Matt and Micah recommend using a VPN service offering extensive cross-platform support. ThreatReel podcast listeners are eligible for up to a 68% discount off NordVPN services. Please visit threatreel.com/NordVPN for details. Again, that's threatreel.com/NordVPN. And we're back. Micah, go ahead and share your favorite memories from SIMPA Security SIG meetings.
There's two that really stood out to me. The last one that we had in person, you had one of our IT security heroes, Dave Kennedy, come down, and we had some darn good barbecue that day. Oh man, that brisket, chicken, pork, smoked sausage, that was phenomenal and so much fun to put together with you. And then you kind of got me back with the little April Fool's Day presentation, smoking from your armpit. And, I was out doing my walk. It was very early in the morning on April Fool's when you sent that joke notification out. But you got me. I'm man enough to say that you got me. But when it was an appropriate time, I called you up and I said, I think you've got something really good. I think people need a good laugh. So we actually turned that into a live event as a bonus.
Yes, you're absolutely right. We did. And that was just something funny. Yeah, and ironically, I want to say I had thought of that just after April Fool's in 2019, and I sat on that material for an entire year, just about, and I was just chomping at the bit to put it out there, and I was hoping I wouldn't spill the beans myself because I thought it was so hilarious. It was hard to keep it to myself, and so yeah, I came up with the title, of course, inspired by your love of making barbecue, and so the title was Hacking Barbecue with Your Raspberry Pi, aka Smoking from Your Armpit. Of course, ARM is a throwback to the CPU architecture that Raspberry Pis are built on. And so yeah, that was great fun. And of course I had written a silly kind of bio for you it started with a true statement and then just kind of got a little silly from there, but it was based on things that I know you're interested in, like the you talked a little bit about car racing and so forth, and kind of a throwback to the speedway thing, and you know, motor speedways and so forth, and and I knew you also were working on DLP projects and so forth. So, and you even plugged my regex talk that I gave at DerbyCon 7, and
Hmm.
so I had to throw in there that you know you had DLP regex patterns printed on your bed sheets, and just it was nothing hateful or mean spirited or anything. It was just funny stuff that was very lighthearted, and at the time, maybe people remember, but we were only a few weeks into the whole COVID lockdown
Hmm.
situation we find ourselves in now. So it was. I hope the humor was appreciated at a time when people needed it the most.
More than you ever know. I had so much fun putting together that presentation and even more fun giving it for everyone. But you are correct. I do have a penchant for smoking fine meats and cocktails. So,
Yes.
but but with respect to the Greater Cincinnati ISSA, I've been volunteering with that group in many different roles throughout the years. But we're a local IT security group. We tend to focus on finding presenters that have vendor agnostic presentation. So we're not really trying to go through and necessarily look for vendor talks. I feel that, if I call a company and say, hey, I want to learn about your product, they're pretty much going to book as soon as possible. So we're looking for independent IT security practitioners. We do about an hour talk and about an hour, a little more, little less of just networking. And our general target audience is usually IT security. Although we have some CISOs that regularly attend, but we also like to have the common practitioner, and we even have some more general IT people that are trying to break in or that just need to go through and ask for a little bit of help. And so we really are there to try to be that basic level IT security group. Now, we have a friend Barry who has the security MBA, which I think, Matt, am I wrong when I say that it is the hoppiest IT security group in the city?
I'd say that's a fair statement. And yeah, you forgot to mention that one time you got so desperate for a speaker at ISSA, you asked me to come in and give that um, talk on Lemmy or IRs again. So, but it was well received. People really enjoyed it, and it was. I was glad to do it. And yeah, I have sampled some of your fine smoked products, and they are out of the park good stuff. I've had a number of pretty much everything you make, I think, and it's always been fantastic. So you definitely take it serious, and you're very good at cooking up some very fine barbecue and smoked products.
Do you remember the sandwich that I made for you, for Mr. Kennedy, for Barry, for Jan when we had Mr. Kennedy come? It was a real nice brioche bun, a strip of brisket on the bottom, then, depending on each person's choice, some pulled pork or pulled chicken, little bit of smoked sausage on top of that, melted just barely, a little bit of sharp cheddar, and drizzled a little bit of barbecue sauce in a double helix before going through and presenting it to you.
That was fantastic. That was one of the best sandwiches I've ever had, hands down. So thank you again. And all right, so hopefully it gives folks a good idea on us and who we are. Let's talk about ThreatReel itself, just briefly here. This is atypical of a show that we plan on going forward. Really, we want to focus on covering threats and so forth. The inspiration for it. So I, I have a warped sense of humor, and I was working for an employer as a system administrator one time, and we were trying to come up with ideas of what we would want to put in a new data center that was being built for a planned, well, really entire business relocation. And I thought about it. We had most of the bases covered that I could think of, and so I suggested, well, we should order this reel-to-reel tape and just like put it on a box and have a motor on an Arduino that will just kind of have the tape spindles move backward and forward at random intervals and so forth. Just sort of thinking back to those sci-fi movies of the 70s and in through the 80s where that was the typical data center scene, right? You would have these big boxes with the blinky lights and the tape reels spinning back and forth, and just thought it would be funny. So that was sort of the joke that stuck with me on having reel-to-reel stuff. And then I always thought if I had a podcast, I would want to focus on threats, because I know the ones I've been on have had different focuses, and I think it's cool because they all serve their own little niche. But for myself, I really wanted something that would kind of get into the heart of the stuff that you and I, as security engineer professionals, deal with on a recurring, seemingly recurring basis. And sometimes the variables at play are a little bit different, different vendors, different products, different attack types, those kind of things. But going forward, those are the kind of things that I think we want to talk about. And then also, I wanted to talk real quick about the music that we use in this podcast. Neither of us are particularly competent at composing music. I'm sure if I had enough time and energy, but I don't have that stuff to devote to learning it, I could have eventually come up with something, but honestly, I don't think it would be quite as good as what we got. Have a friend that, longtime friend, we go back all the way to elementary school. His name is Dave Whitener, and he is a talented musician and composer. In his spare time, but he's been doing that stuff since we were, I want to say early in high school, and he was actually working on original music composition stuff back then. And so I had reached out to him really as my first call, saying, hey, we're thinking of doing this podcast. I don't hear a lot of these with music in them, but I would like to do that, and have an introduction theme song for it, and things as we come in and out of breaks and stuff like that. So I reached out to him, and I threw a lot of different random thoughts and like these just crazy influences that were all over the map of sort of what I thought was interesting, and he took all of that stuff and funneled it into the intro song that we have, and all the music that we use in the podcast. So I definitely want to say thanks to him. And if you like the music here, you can check out some of his other work at davewhitener.com/music, and would encourage folks to do that. And then my hopes for this podcast are that going forward we can dig into the important security topics that are impacting us on a recurring basis, and the things that are impacting us that we have to work with and face on a daily basis. So those are typically what I think we want to do going forward. That's why this is episode 0, is our pilot, just to kind of introduce ourselves to folks, let them know who we are, what our backgrounds are, and I think that we've done that. So with that, I would let you go ahead and share your thoughts, Micah, on what we plan to do and what you want to get out of the podcast, and what you hope our listeners will get out of listening to us in the future.
Sure. Thank you for that, Matt. I have been very passionate of going through and giving back. The only reason where I've gotten to where I am within my career is because other people have helped me. So I want to use this to go through and to give back to the community through whether it's promoting various local events that are going on, highlighting people that are doing real good out there in the community. I definitely want to see if we can highlight some of those really talented people within our organizations, within our groups, and make sure that they are recognized. I know that you've seen that I've been working with a couple of people, helping them either create their own CFPs or even going through and working to create an entire talk with somebody that has never really given a talk before, and helping them go from right creation to full execution. So I'm hoping that this is just going to be another way in which we can give back and have just a little bit of fun.
Great, thank you for that. And yeah, mentorship is very important to me as well. It's something that we both take very seriously, and we do a lot of. And we're not out there to try to make ourselves, pat ourselves on the back for our efforts, but we both have those same motivations and drivers because we want to see the Cincinnati information security scene flourish, and we're trying to extend that a little bit, which is sort of the other part of this podcast, to expand our reach a little bit and hopefully provide information that helps other working information security professionals or people that are looking to become that in their paths. So that's something that I think we both take very seriously, and definitely hope to do going forward. And you mentioned events, so why don't we go ahead and wrap up our show by sort of talking about some of the events that we're involved with. And the first thing I want to talk about is I am going to be giving a talk at WAMSA, which is the Women's Security Alliance. And it's going to be a panel discussion on increasing the talent pool in Central and Southwest Ohio. And that is going to be on Thursday, April 15th from 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time to 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And details are available at their website, which is wamsa.org. And also, I want to talk real quick about the April SIMPA Security SIG meeting that I'm running. That is going to be on Thursday, April 15th from 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time to 9 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, starting half an hour earlier than usual because it is a 3-hour workshop. And what this is a live hands-on workshop for investigation and threat hunting. It's a virtual hands-on workshop with Palo Alto Networks, and partnering with them to deliver that and give folks some opportunity to get some real hands-on experience. And even if people aren't using their products, those same threat hunting methodologies, investigation methodologies are pertinent across XDR solutions regardless of your vendor of choice. So hopefully folks will join us for that. Details for all of these are available on ThreatReel.com, and I will let you, Micah, close out with your next upcoming event.
Sure. Thank you very much, Matt. So I submitted last year to RSA conference, and I got accepted as a tentative last year. They didn't need my services, but this year I'm down as an official presenter at RSA conference, it's amazing. It's humbling that even as an independent IT security practitioner, that if you put in the work, you can be recognized by some of the titans of our industry, that you can have an impact. And so I'm honored to represent Cincinnati on that stage.
All right, great. Thanks so much, Micah. Thank you for listening to the ThreatReel podcast pilot episode, all in podcast music, copyright 2021, Dave Whitener. Visit online at davewhitener.com/music. Used with permission by ThreatReel.